to be honest, and to be on the other side of the microphone. Because normally on Saturdays, I'm on the other side, moaning and groaning and suffering and smiling and just going through the grueling bits of sobriety. But it's such an honour to be on the other side, to actually share some insights into my menopause journey, which I've only really got my head around recently. I will share with you lots of insights that I think will resonate with everybody, and we can definitely share some tips. And with the guys on the call as well, I'd be very interested to hear your views on what it's like for you on the other side, because if I lived with me, I would definitely be on the booze. So we'll look at both sides. A bit about me. I'm 56, just recently had my birthday, and I'm a mum, 3 teenage boys. I've been married to my husband, Richard, for 24 years. I was born in Sheffield in the north of England, and then moved to London in my early 20s for work. Fast forward 20 years, then moved with 2 small kids to France, which is where I then lived for 18 years, and my children were raised bilingual. Only just recently, in the last few months, I switched over the border to Switzerland, which is probably why it's been quite confusing on the Saturdays to understand, where does that woman live? 1 minute she's in France, 1 minute she's in Switzerland. I'm actually hopping from one side of the border to the other, and it's a very long story, but right now I live in Switzerland. My drinking career, I've listened to so many podcasts. I have really immersed myself in other people's war stories. And I always used to say to myself, how difficult would that be to try and summarize 40 years of drinking? I've tried now to do that and to pick out the key bits. What's very apparent to me is that each decade of drinking for me had very different behaviors and very different attitudes. And it got worse and worse until just this year, where I decided to quit. So it started in my teens. I'd say my teens were the decade about experimentation. I was at secondary school. Friday night was very typical, out drinking with the girlfriends. We would raid someone's drinks cabinet, hit a nightclub. It was just great fun, really empowering, really naughty. It just made us feel invincible. We thought we were the Spice Girls of our time. And there was nothing untoward about that. It's just what everyone did. I slid into my early 20s when I went to university. There was a little bit more drinking, nothing too crazy. But when it really took off for me was in my mid-20s, when I moved to London and got my first amazing job as a management consultant. And we worked hard and we played even harder. So cocktails, wine, champagne were our reward for just basically showing up at work and giving our souls to the job. We travelled a lot, and the currency in my role was drink. And this was really typical of the corporate world at that time. It loosened us all up. We did a lot of corporate events. We did a lot of schmoozing with clients. Even amongst ourselves, we drank. It was just what the currency of the day was. That was huge fun. I'd call those my champagne decade. It was huge fun. It was very extravagant, very excessive, and lots of partying, all paid for by the business. So I thought I was the cat that got the cream, to be honest with you. Then I slid into my 30s. Things got more serious. I met my husband. We got married. He also, corporate guy, also loved to drink. We bought a house together. And in the noughties, socializing was all about fancy dinner parties. You'd have all your friends around who were also double income, no kids, splashing the cash around. We could do whatever we wanted. We had after work drinks. There was just no ties. All you did was work, go on holiday, and drink. That seemed to be my life in the early 30s. I also switched job then. I went from management consultancy to investment banking. Instead of traveling around the world, I was actually based in London, which was brilliant because it meant I could actually start to nest. But my lifestyle was still very hedonistic. And again, my husband and I, 2 incomes, no children, living in London. You can imagine it was crazy. And all our friends were exactly the same. Then as my job got bigger, I used to work in trading, equities trading on the trading floor. Very stressful job. I noticed more and more that I would be looking for people to have drinks after work to relieve the stress. And that crept in more and more. And there was always somebody to down a bottle at the local wine bar before you went home, had dinner, and then went to bed and started it all over again the next day. Then, as I got towards my mid-30s, I hit fertility issues and I was trying quite hard to have a baby, but my party lifestyle started to show big cracks on my health. That was probably my first wake-up call. So I decided to dial down work and went part-time. I ate a lot better, drank a bit less, eventually fell pregnant in my late 30s. I had a baby. I went straight back to work full time. I would be in the office for 7 a.m., hand over the baby to the nanny. It was mad. There was a book at the time, and I felt like I was like the living embodiment of this woman called Kate Reddy. The book was called I Don't Know How She Does It by Alison Pearson. That was my go-to book. There was a lady who worked in the corporate world, and she had it all. On the surface, she was a successful suit-wearing, badass corporate lady, 2 children, husband. She was a sex bomb. She had it all. I really thought that I was her. But unfortunately, underneath, it was all going to shit, big time. And by about 39, with 2 small babies, working far too hard, juggling nannies, I just imploded and I ended up in rehab. At the time, I called it burnout. Now I would call it alcohol excess, everything excess. But at the time, work would call it burnout. I basically ended up in rehab for a month and then another month. And then I was forced afterwards to take stock. I suppose that's my second wake up call, take stock and think about the world through different eyes. So with 2 babies, I left work, I moved country, and that's when I moved to France. And in my 40s, that's a nice decade really, because I was a full-time mum, living in France, built a house, and it was actually really quite a nice time. No mummy wine culture in France, so I wasn't tempted by the Friday after gymboree or whatever they call it here. There was none of that. So my drinking was really when my husband came home because he still worked in London. So I was home alone in the week with the babies. And then he would come home at weekends and we would just have our own party. We were our own party. We just used to drink together at weekends. Then he'd leave and then I would look after the kids. That happened for many years until I slid into my 50s. This is the decade where I can honestly say it was my most miserable drinking years. Constant conflict in my head. The moderation started, the rules were introduced. I had an app where I tracked my units every day. I beat myself up constantly if I was over. I just used to get pissed very quickly, got really embarrassing in front of the kids in my 50s and late 40s. It was just very obvious there was a shift going on in my body I hadn't quite caught up with, which was when I drink, I just act more irrationally. I would get drunk very quickly, fall over, talk rubbish, not really blacking out. I had a few, but just talking garbage, thinking that I was fine, getting in the car, picking up the kids from school, just garbage like this. My husband was away an awful lot and I drank alone. And I thought, again, I thought it was amazing. I used to get my wine out at 4 o'clock, the kids after school. Yeah, it was miserable, absolutely miserable. Next wake-up call, 2022, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and at the age of 54. And yeah, that's when I realized that, okay, if it's not going to be breast cancer, it's going to be something else. And sure enough, it was the thyroid that got me in the end. And I decided to quit. Still took me another year, the summer afterwards. And I set the day for the 1st of September. And it's been my first ever attempt at sobriety. And I was absolutely determined to make it work. And I knew at that point I had to put everything in place. the community, the coach, the books, no booze in the house, all the things that you need to make it work. Here I am, nearly 8 months later, embracing it, full steam ahead, and championing it actually for the first time. I've even got some recruits at Pilates. I'm telling them all to come and join me because they're all intrigued because they all knew me as the Hélène who was always on the one. What can I say? So that's me and my decades of drinking. But this is all about the menopause years and how I literally blissfully drank my way through the last 10 years or so. So let's go back to my decades in my 40s where the menopause symptoms started for me. So if I just remind you, this is when I'd moved to France with 2 kids. I was a stay-at-home mum. I was pretty happy with my lot. My husband had set up a business in the UK, so he was never there in the week. I noticed during my 40s a big shift in my drinking behavior, new behaviors around drinking that I hadn't really done in the past. And it's only become apparent to me now looking back, but I'll talk about a bit about that more later. The striking thing looking back now, 10, 12 years, is how little I knew about menopause, perimenopause, the change in general. There were so many things I didn't know about this period of time that I do now because I've now decided to take hormone health into my hands and really understand better about what on earth is going on in my body. So a little bit of science. So 3 phases to the menopause. There's the perimenopause, which kicks in about your early 40s. Perimenopause lasts about 10 years typically, until the day that your periods become intermittent and then finally stop. That period, 10 to 12 years, is long. And that's when you gradually notice your body starting to do weird things. Night sweats, that was a big one for me. I would drench the bed and put towels down and drench the bed every single night. There were mood swings. I was very irrational. Hot flushes in the day, like my control panel just wasn't working. I had to take jumpers off and then put them back on. Brain fog, forgetfulness. Luckily, I was a stay-at-home mom. I just put that down to being a mom and not having responsibilities at work, but it was still there. I still noticed that I was forgetting people's names, headaches, hormone headaches all the time. Other symptoms, very disturbed sleep, loss of bone density, osteoporosis starts to really kick in at this time of your life. That whole annoying thing of the tie around your tummy, tie under your arms, all these little flabby bits. All of that is to do with the change and the menopause. So basically, through these 10 to 12 years, your hormones are plummeting at quite a fast rate. Your estrogen, your progesterone, and your testosterone are nosediving, and these are all the things you need for your body to function properly. With those depleting by the day, you're going to get all these crappy symptoms. And it's no wonder all of these layered on top of the other just makes you feel like you're going absolutely mad. And this is very typically when women will go to the doctor and say, there's something not right here. And then the doctor will say, oh, sounds like you need to have antidepressants, which is exactly what my doctor said to me. So I go on the antidepressants. It kind of muted things, but it didn't quite fix it all. But I found the best thing for me was at the end of the day, was to just go and have a drink and drink it all away and put myself out at night, not realizing, of course, that was all exacerbating all those symptoms even more. Long and drawn out, and obviously varies from person to person, but it is a thing. And these are very common symptoms. Then your periods stop eventually. So let's say around 52 to 55. That is the day of your menopause. So in fact, your menopause is only one day. That is literally no more periods. Boom, you now go on to the other side, which is the post-menopause. And these are all the years after your period until the day you die, which is where I am now. Post-menopause brings a whole host of different and interesting symptoms as well. I'd like to say it's better than perimenopause. It's less up and down for me anyway, but it's still tricky and it's still worth reading up about to navigate your way through it and to make the best of those post-menopause years. So I said I'd go back to my 40s and how perimenopause looked for me. So I screwed things up because I had my third child at the age of 42. So I was having, at 42, hormones coming out of my ears all over the place. I was crying, I had mood swings, hot sweats, I was absolutely knackered. Surely all of these symptoms is because I had a newborn and two toddlers. Menopause? What's that? Didn't even cross my mind that there would be that layer at the time. I continued for the next 5 years with the babies, with all of those symptoms, just assuming it was part and parcel of being an older mom and a bit knackered around the edges, with very little help as well. Then at 48, I had a hysterectomy. So my uterus was removed, my ovaries were still there. So it meant that I was put into a premature menopause. So again, masking all of those menopausal symptoms, which is so easy to do just living everyday life. It's very difficult to pinpoint a symptom to a particular thing. I had all these things going on. I had young children. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had this hysterectomy, which meant that my estrogen levels were next to zero. No progesterone because I had no uterus. So yeah, it's no doubt that I was feeling pretty schizophrenic by that point and pretty frantic. So I did drink to sort all of that out without doubt. Those symptoms lasted until my 50s, and I had no excuse really because my children started to grow up. And my bad sleep wasn't because of them, it was because of the drink, but of course I didn't want to know that. I was offered, actually, interestingly, by the gynecologist HRT at the time after my hysterectomy to replace the hormones that had obviously gone to zero. At the time, foolishly, I said, no merci, because HRT, I had read, causes breast cancer. We have a lot of breast cancer in my family. I immediately went, no way, I'm not taking any estrogen because I've read that will give me breast cancer and I do not want breast cancer to suffer in the same way as my mum and granny and all the rest of it. So I turned that down without reading up on further on the whole subject. And I really wish I had 8 years ago because it has since been dispelled, the myth that HRT causes breast cancer, and it absolutely does not. HRT, now that I'm back on it now for the first time in my life, really is astonishing. I'll come back to that later in terms of one of the things I've done. Before you make any decision about taking supplementing, actually it's not replacing, it's actually injecting back in the hormones that you have lost through your natural menopause cycle. So it is something that's being put back into your body and not adding to what you already have. So there's actually nothing unnatural about it at all. But there had been a report ages ago that tried to prove that it was linked to cancer, and in fact, it's not. Today at 56, I'm out the other side, I'm in postmenopause. My night sweats have actually gone away. I do suffer from broken sleep and I do get irritable and stressed and anxious, but I'm off the antidepressants and I've decided that since quitting the drink, no medication whatsoever apart from the one I have to take for my thyroid. And I just want to observe my body for the first time naked. What are the symptoms? What happens if I change this? What happens if I do that? How often does that happen? Really see myself for the first time properly, which is a first, an absolute first and a real eye opener. I've noticed that since I stopped drinking, hallelujah, I actually sleep better. That's all very nice. I also have started to take estrogen, which is like a little gel that you rub on your arms. and I started to sleep a little bit better because of that as well. I also had a bone density scan, and lo and behold, I had osteopenia, which is where your density is quite poor in certain areas. So whilst you can never regain lost bone density, you can maintain it by doing weight-bearing exercises. So I do a lot of Pilates, reformer, walking, all that kind of things. And I take calcium supplements and vitamin D. So these are all things you can do for your bone health to make sure that as you go into your 50s and 60s, they really are in great shape. I also take magnesium, which is brilliant apparently for 50-year-olds, for your mood and generally for sleep. Take that before you go to bed. In terms of my diet, that's been overhauled as well. I eat much more protein, plant-based food. I even do a little bit of intermittent fasting. I overhauled my diet. I just relax a lot more, just take it easy. I sit down, read, stop running on empty, try to take the overwhelm out of my life, stop running after everybody. I think that's the main thing. I find removing the overwhelm really helps with just getting my body back into sync. Bit of yoga here and there, but I find it's the walk that does it to me with a podcast. And yeah, all of these things, then stopping drinking and really looking more carefully at my hormone health, have helped me to be more in tune with my body. And I really recommend doing that after a few months of sobriety under your belt. Two things though I still have: headaches every single morning. So if anyone has got any ideas about how to get rid of headaches, then please shout. And yeah, just general dryness. So I suppose cod oil, fish supplements might help with that. Yeah, those are my 40s. That was my experience of the menopause. I had no idea as I went through it. It's only now looking back that I can see what that looked like. It's only now since I've read up, gosh, okay, so that it really is a big deal. This is my body actually physically going through significant change and very challenging changes on top of everything else that's going on in my life. So to summarize, there is no denying that perimenopause reduces your body's ability to metabolize alcohol. When you look back at your drinking in your 40s and compared to your 30s and 20s, that same bottle of wine just ends in a rubbish place in your 40s and 50s. And the blackouts get blacker and longer and more disturbed. Really quite shocking and noticeable change in terms of your motor skills really go quickly. This is all because going to menopause, your body's not quite eliminating the toxins at the right pace. And then on top of that, of course, we've got osteoporosis that's loaded and heart disease, apparently. So the more we drink on whilst menopausal, the more of these symptoms show through. So reaching for that glass or five at the end of the day is really not the answer. I really wish I had known this then and done something about it all those years ago. It's a dangerous mix. It's a dangerous mix with menopause. So my tips are: read up on hormone health, observe your moods now that you've all quit drinking, observe your sleeping habits with and without the drink. Do you have joint pains? When do you get those? Do you still feel anxious? When does that happen? How does that happen? Do you still get hormone headaches? Why might that be? Is it related to the menopause where you are in that stage of life? Is it what you're eating? It's really good to strip everything back and look at all of these symptoms and tie it back to something in particular. And then you can try different remedies, natural or otherwise, to try and really reduce them. I'm still, it's a work in progress. I'm still wanting to maximize my post-menopause years and get the most out of them. And I know I've still got a long way to go. This is the beginning. By taking the drink out, I know that's the biggest gift I've given myself. Now it's layering the other bits on and learning more and more about how my brain works, how my limbs work, how my muscles work, how my bones work, how my psyche works, and getting all of those finally in sync and actually treating myself with some kind of care and respect and love instead of just drinking it all away, drinking it all away.